Hello everyone, Jules here. Today I'd like to talk about some interesting books about mythology. And the first one I want to talk about particularly is because this book is about to be published as a hardcover book, and I think it's already just been reissued and republished. That is a book by Joseph Campbell called Occidental Mythology. And this is a paperback version of the book, and this is part of the Masks of God series. This is book 3 in that series, and Joseph Campbell was a very well known and well regarded mythologist. And Occidental is a term that's not used very much anymore. Volume 2 was called Oriental Mythology, which is about Eastern mythology. So this Occidental Mythology volume is about Western mythology. So this is a really great book. It's a classic book. This is the interpretation of Western mythology by Joseph Campbell. And I'll just give you an idea of what's in the book. It starts with, part 1 is about the goddess. So part 1 is the age of the goddess. And so it starts there, and it goes in chronological order. So that's why it starts with the age of the goddess to begin with, because that's the oldest time period. And it starts with Age of the Goddess, part 1, myth and ritual. And then part 2 is the Age of Heroes. And what I like about this book is that it's including Hebrew mythology as well. So this is Middle Eastern as well as Western, because I do regard Middle Eastern as Western, because the Babylonian civilization and the Persian civilization predated the ancient Greek civilization. So that's why I always see Middle Eastern civilization predating and associated with Western mythology. So you have part 2, the Age of Heroes, and that starts with the Hebrew mythology, which is really interesting because a lot of people, of course, know about biblical stories, but they don't really know about the kind of link. Religion has a link to mythology, to the earlier mythology. So that's really interesting context to keep in mind. Then it goes into what's called the European West, which is starts to get into the Greek mythology. And then it gets into the Persian period, which is that's really interesting. So it goes the Hebrew, then it sort of goes over into the Western or Greek, then it goes into the Persian period, and then it goes back into the later Greek period again, the period of Hellenism, Hellenic Greece. Then it goes into Rome, the Roman mythology. So the Persian period is the start of part 3, I should say that. So part 3 is called the Age of the Great Classics, so classic mythology. You start with the Persian period, then the Greek Hellenic period, then you go into the Roman period. And then part 4 is called the Age of Great Beliefs. Now I also like the way that this is done as well, because again, when you're using the word belief, you are starting to link mythology and religion, you're looking at the relationship between the two, and there definitely was, because religion and mythology, ancient religion and philosophy, branched out of the earlier mythological thinking. So that's really important to keep in mind. And this is where part 4, the Age of Great Beliefs, this is going into the Byzantium period. It's going into the beginning of Islam and Muslim beliefs. And then you go into the last chapter of part 4, which is called Europe Resurgent. So there's an index at the back, there's reference notes. It really is a classic book. I think it is probably one of the best books on Western mythology around. And it has been reissued and republished over a long period of time. This was written in 1964. But it's still just as relevant, of course, today. So this book has appeared many times. It's several, decades since then. But there is a new version that has just been published or about to be republished this month. A hardcover version. It's published by New World Library. So I wanted to particularly tell people about this book because it's just been republished. This paperback version was published by Penguin, and I'll put the details below the video. So I wanted to start with that one. The next one is really handy book. This is a paperback book called The Oxford Dictionary of World Mythology by Arthur Cottrell. This is such a really handy guide. This is world mythology, and it literally is all the different parts of the world, and it's all divided into different parts of the world, and for each of the chapters, the gods and goddesses are all in alphabetical order, which is really handy. So this is such a useful guide. And it actually says here, the ideal quick reference guide to deities, spirits and myths. It's a really wonderful, compact, handy guidebook. And one more thing I want to mention about the relevance of the Joseph Campbell book is the other thing that I like with his interpretation. It's not only his interpretation of the myths, of the stories themselves, but he's actually talking about the themes that underlie the art and the literature of the Western world. So that influence remained for hundreds of years after. And so that's something else I wanted to mention as well. I also like the way that Joseph Campbell talks about the influence on art and literature as well, on the later themes of art and literature. So another great book. This is Classical Mythology, a guide to the mythical world of the Greeks and Romans by William Hansen. This is one of the best guides around. It's just a wonderful book. I love the way it's set out. And particularly if you are interested in Greek and Roman mythology, this is a great book to get. Has some drawings and pictures in here as well. This is published by Oxford. And the way that it is set out, it starts off with things with art, which I really like. The introduction sets out the basic concepts so that you have the different periods, the different time periods. You have the different mythological worlds and the different concepts in regard to that. You have timelines, and then you get into deities, themes and concepts, and all of the deities are in alphabetical order again, which is very important. And then you've got a really good print, a really good list of print resources, different reference works and ancient sources as well. And there's a glossary as well as an index in here. So this is a great book as well. Classical Mythology by William Hansen, A Guide to the Mythical World of the Greeks and Romans. So it's a really great book. It's a paperback book. All the books I'm showing today are paperback. Now, this next book might be quite... Now, it's not difficult to get, actually. You can still get this book, but I've got an earlier edition, and I've got the second edition here, and this is available in a sixth edition now. It's paperback, but it's a really thick book. It's about 1,000 pages. This is like an absolute Bible of classical mythology, by Stephen Harris and Gloria Platzner. So this is the second volume, and like I said, it's a very thick book. So this is the second edition. But I just see this as my Bible. It's one of those books that if you're only going to get one book, I think it's this one. And this is in different parts. So part one is all about myth, particularly from the historical perspective, and the literary aspect of myth as well, because these are stories. And this also includes not only Greek and Roman, but Middle Eastern as well, because these are the very really old, because these Mesopotamian myths, for example, are older. You know, this is the oldest. The Mesopotamian and Babylonian civilizations predate just about almost everything in the world, particularly the Western world. Then it goes into, you've got that, so that's the introduction, and then it's got ways of interpreting myth, which I think is a really good idea, because the ancient way to view myth, of course, is quite different to interpreting myth by Joseph Campbell, for example, or Carl Jung. They were later interpretations of myth, and so this compares the ancient way of viewing myth in comparison to the modern interpretation of myth. And then part two is the actual mythic world of the gods and goddesses, and there is a separate section on heroes. And what I like about this book is that it is tying it into the Greek classics, which were the sources of these stories. And it also mentions the Titans, because the Titans were the original gods, the original Greek gods before the Olympian pantheon. So a lot of people normally get books mostly about the Olympian pantheon, but the Titan gods were really important because they were particularly to do with creation mythology, the creation concepts of the ancient Greece. That was older than the Olympian pantheon that most people are familiar with. So I like that is mentioned and included, and it's all part of the timeline, so that's really good. And then it gets into the Olympian family, which is really the Olympian family of Zeus. And then it goes into the Apollo's oracle at Delphi. Also a whole chapter on Dionysus, or Dionysus, whichever way you want to pronounce that. It goes into the kingdom of Hades, the underworld. And the whole chapter then about the heroes and how the hero concept is the whole explanation of the hero concept. I think that's a really good idea, and the different aspects of the hero concept. There's a lot in here. You know, you've got 1,000 pages. That's why I love this book. It's like a Bible for me. And so there's a huge section just about the hero in here, all the different hero stories and the context of that. Then it goes into the world of classical tragedy, which is really important because this is the birth of drama, of the early Greek theatre, of the first plays. So that's important. That's part 3. So that's talking all about the different plays and Greek tragedy. Part 4 then goes into the world of Roman myth. So you're looking at that. You're looking at the tales of Ovid and the historical classic Roman sources for that. Then you go into part 5, the Western world's transformation of myth. So there was a revival of classical mythology several times in history, like particularly the Renaissance period and the Victorian period as well after that. And then it talks about the influence of myth on culture, which is art and literature in this book as well. And we're talking about, it's particularly from Rome, the Romantic era, the Romantic age. The word romantic actually comes from the Romans. So they basically invented romance and the Romantic age. Then you are talking about, then the book talks about poets, particular poets who have been influenced by mythology. There's so many of them. Most of these are from the Victorian period, with the exception of Dante, and that's from the much earlier period. And then you've got a list of works that reinterpret the classical myth. So that just continues on from there, where you're talking about fiction, poetry, drama, art, music, later film. And then you finish off with a glossary bibliography index. So 1,000 pages. I really love this book. Classical Mythology, Images and Insights by Stephen Harris and Gloria Platzner. Second edition here, but you can get this in a 6th edition. I'm pretty sure it's still paperback. It's a wonderful, really, really wonderful book. And just to finish up, the last book ties things together in regard to myth and philosophy, and also how myth it's really a basis for not only the Greek philosophy, that was the first kind of belief system that branched out of myth, and then how it also connected to the later formation of religion. So this is a great book, Myth and Philosophy by Lawrence Hatab. It's a really great book. This book is probably got too much philosophy for a lot of people. If you are a philosophy fan like I am, I'm really interested in myth and philosophy equally. So this is a great book who particularly want that philosophical approach, and people who want to see how these two things can possibly be related, because they definitely are, especially when you look at the origin of the very, very earliest philosophy coming out of ancient Greece with Pythagoras and Plato. So, Myth and Philosophy by Lawrence Hatab. I think the best thing also about this book is that one of the last chapters is like a summary about the whole relationship between philosophy and myth. I think a summary at the back of the book is a really great idea. Not many books have that, but I really like that. There's an index in this book as well. So this is a great book for people who particularly want to have a look at the relationship between myth and philosophy. And there's also information in here about how all of this myth and philosophy then kind of branched out into religious thought as well. So Myth and Philosophy by Lawrence Hatab, and I'll put some details below the video about all of these books. But mythology is a really wide subject, but it's really important for people who are interested in spirituality, esoteric philosophy. It just underpins so many things. If you're particularly interested in spirituality and or esoteric philosophy. So I'll put some details below the video. Thanks for watching. Bye for now.